Lily was only 10 when she first stepped into the city zoo, holding her mother's hand a little tighter than usual. The doctors had just told her parents something no one ever wants to hear, that their little girl's illness couldn't be cured. But that day, Lily wasn't thinking about hospitals or medicines. She was thinking about animals, sunshine, and one last summer that still felt full of life. Before I tell you what she did next, comment below and tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to know how this story reaches your heart. Have you ever met someone whose spirit seemed to shine brighter even when life tried to dim it? Some people carry that kind of quiet light, and Lily was one of them. And what makes a child like her find peace in a place like a zoo? Maybe it's because animals don't judge, they don't pity, and they never ask for explanations, they simply exist, and somehow that was enough for Lily. The zoo that morning smelled of wet leaves and peanuts. Families wandered from cage to cage, children pointing and laughing. But Lily didn't rush. Every few steps she stopped, watching the smallest details, how the monkeys held their babies, how the birds preened their feathers, how the lions blinked slowly under the sun. It was as if she was memorizing everything. Her parents followed closely behind, watching her quietly. They didn't want to talk about her condition, not here. Here, she looked alive, as if each breath had purpose. Her mother smiled through tears that she hid behind her sunglasses, and her father held the camera but never took a picture. He was afraid that capturing the moment might make it too real. Then, as they reached the gorilla enclosure, Lily suddenly stopped. Her small hand lifted, pointing at a massive figure sitting alone behind the glass. "He looks sad," she whispered. The gorilla, a male named Kobo, raised his dark eyes toward her. For a moment, the noise of the zoo disappeared, and there was only that silent exchange. It wasn't fear she felt, it was recognition, as if she understood something wordless about him. Kobo didn't move, but his eyes followed her, calm and curious. Lily pressed her hand to the glass, and though separated by inches of barrier and species, something invisible connected them. Her mother noticed, puzzled, but didn't interrupt. Lily stayed there for several minutes, just looking. When she finally walked away, Kobo moved closer to where she had stood, pressing his palm where hers had been. A zookeeper nearby noticed and whispered, "He never does that." Nobody understood it then, but something remarkable had begun in that moment, something that would later touch the world. That evening, as they left the zoo, Lily looked back one last time. "Can we come again tomorrow?" she asked softly. Her parents exchanged a look. They both knew what tomorrow meant for her, but they also knew they couldn't say no. The next morning, the sun filtered softly through gray clouds as Lily and her parents returned to the zoo. She moved slower that day, her small backpack bouncing lightly on her shoulders. As they entered the familiar path lined with trees, she headed straight toward the gorilla habitat, skipping every other animal. Kobo was there, sitting in his usual corner, quiet and still. When Lily approached, he lifted his head as if he had been waiting. She pressed her hand against the glass again, her palm tiny compared to his. The air felt heavy but calm, as though the world had slowed down just for them. Kobo tilted his head slightly, studying her face. Lily smiled, whispering something only he could hear. Visitors around them barely noticed, to them, it was just a girl looking at a gorilla. But something about their silence carried weight, an unspoken conversation that neither language nor sound could capture. The zookeeper from the previous day watched from afar. He'd worked with Kobo for years and had never seen him act this way. Usually, Kobo ignored people, preferring to sit alone or wander to the back of his enclosure. But now, he stayed close to the glass, his deep brown eyes tracking Lily's every movement. The man felt a shiver of curiosity. "He knows her," he muttered under his breath, not sure why he believed it. Lily's mother crouched beside her, watching the exchange. "He likes you," she whispered with a fragile smile. Lily nodded. "I think he's lonely." There was no fear in her voice, only kindness. Her father took a cautious photo this time, wanting to freeze that connection before it slipped away like so many other moments had. When Kobo saw the camera, he blinked slowly, then returned his gaze to Lily, steady and patient. Minutes passed. Lily began to draw in her small sketchbook, a habit she'd formed during her long hospital stays. She drew Kobo sitting among trees, not behind glass, with sunlight touching his fur. When she showed the sketch to him through the glass, Kobo leaned closer, nostrils flaring as if he could smell the paper. Then, he pressed his forehead lightly against the barrier. It was a small gesture, but her parents could feel the tenderness behind it. People walking by started to notice. Some smiled, some recorded with their phones. But for Lily and Kobo, the rest of the zoo faded away. A strange calm filled that space, a meeting between two souls who didn't need words. She began to hum softly, a melody she'd learned from her grandmother. Kobo tilted his head again, almost as if listening. His massive chest rose and fell in rhythm with her song. The zookeeper later wrote in his report that Kobo's behavior changed that day. He stayed near the glass long after Lily left, refusing his usual food until evening. He seemed restless, glancing at the entrance whenever footsteps passed. It was as if he expected her to return. The staff couldn't explain it, but those who saw it said they'd never forget the look in his eyes, gentle, searching, almost human. That night, Lily placed her drawing of Kobo on her nightstand beside her medication. "He's my friend," she told her mother before falling asleep. The house was quiet except for the faint sound of the city outside. Her parents looked at each other, unsure whether to smile or cry. Somewhere across town, under dim lights and the hum of crickets, Kobo also lay down, his eyes heavy, his heart strangely full. The next week turned into a quiet ritual. Every morning after breakfast, Lily would ask her parents if they could visit the zoo, just for a little while. Her doctors encouraged anything that made her smile, so her parents agreed. Each day, Kobo waited by the same spot near the glass before visitors arrived. When Lily appeared, his posture shifted, and his dark eyes softened. The keepers started calling it the 10 a.m. miracle. Lily began bringing small gifts, wildflowers she picked from the park, shiny pebbles she found along the path, and sometimes her own drawings. She arranged them neatly at the base of the glass. Kobo watched her carefully, lowering his head as if inspecting each item. When she placed a yellow daisy one morning, he pressed his nose close, and she laughed quietly. "You like that one," she said, her voice full of warmth. Her parents often sat on a nearby bench, holding hands while they watched. They didn't need to speak, the sight of Lily and the gorilla said more than words could. Her mother started bringing a thermos of tea, and her father, once hesitant, began taking more pictures. People who visited the zoo regularly began to recognize Lily too. Some waved when they saw her, others whispered softly, "That's the girl the gorilla loves." Over time, Lily began talking to Kobo as if he were a friend sitting across the table. She told him about her favorite stories, about the rain that drummed on her window at night, about her dreams of visiting the ocean. Kobo often sat still, listening with a focus that felt almost human. When she paused, he sometimes tapped the glass lightly with his fingers, and she smiled as if he had just answered. One afternoon, Lily decided to draw him again, but this time she drew both of them together, her sitting beside Kobo under a wide blue sky. When she finished, she taped the paper to the glass. Kobo tilted his head and moved closer, his breath fogging a corner of the drawing. For a moment, their reflections merged in the glass, two shapes sharing the same space. A keeper passing by stopped and stared, unable to move. The bond between them became the talk of the zoo staff. Some believed it was coincidence, others said it was something deeper. Kobo's behavior was changing, he seemed calmer, more curious, and oddly protective when Lily was near. When other visitors got too close, he sometimes turned his back until they left. The staff began timing their feeding schedule around Lily's visits, as if her presence was part of his care. Rain or shine, Lily came. On rainy days, she'd wear a bright red raincoat and stand under her umbrella, sketching while droplets slid down the glass. Kobo would watch the water trails as if tracing them with his mind. On sunny days, she'd sit cross-legged with her sketchbook open, humming softly. The keepers started to say that Kobo smiled more now, though no one could explain how they knew. At night, Lily kept her sketches stacked neatly beside her bed. She told her mother that Kobo made her feel brave, that when she looked into his eyes, she didn't think about being sick. Her mother kissed her forehead, whispering that maybe some friendships don't need words at all. And somewhere behind thick walls and iron gates, Kobo slept soundly for the first time in years, waiting for the morning light that always brought her back. By the third week, the zookeepers could no longer ignore what they were seeing. Kobo's behavior had changed in ways that none of them could explain. The gorilla who once kept to the shadows now waited near the viewing glass every morning. As soon as Lily's footsteps echoed along the path, he'd rise and move closer, sitting upright as if ready to listen. One of the senior keepers, Mark, started keeping notes in a small journal, documenting each reaction. Mark had worked with animals for 20 years, yet he found himself puzzled by Kobo's transformation. "It's not just curiosity," he told a colleague one afternoon. "He's happier. He's aware." The other keeper laughed softly, saying it was probably coincidence. But that same day, they both watched as Kobo gently picked up his food bowl for the first time in months, ate everything, and then looked toward the entrance where Lily usually appeared. Before Lily began visiting, Kobo had refused to eat regularly. He'd push away fruit, ignore enrichment toys, and show little interest in his surroundings. Now, he ate with appetite, even sharing space with the younger gorillas without aggression. His once slow, cautious movements had become lively again. The zoo's veterinarian noted improvement in his health, better digestion, brighter eyes, steadier breathing. Nobody could deny that something had shifted inside him. When Lily arrived, Kobo sometimes thumped his chest softly, not in anger but in recognition. The sound made nearby children gasp, and Lily giggled every time. "He's saying hello," she'd tell her parents. The keepers observed how she spoke to him with gentle authority, never afraid, always kind. She didn't treat him like an animal behind glass. To her, he was simply Kobo, her friend, her listener, her quiet mirror. Mark began timing how long Kobo stayed near the glass after Lily left. At first, it was a few minutes. Then half an hour. Then nearly 2. He'd sit by the spot where her flowers lay, touching them with the tip of his finger. When the wind blew, carrying the petals away, Kobo would watch until the last one disappeared. The staff began to whisper that he was mourning her absence, even when she'd be back the next morning. Word spread among the employees. Even the director came to see what everyone was talking about. Standing by the enclosure one morning, he crossed his arms, skeptical. But as he watched Kobo carefully arranging leaves near the glass while Lily laughed softly on the other side, his expression changed. "He's not performing," the director said quietly. "He's responding." It wasn't a show, it was something deeper, something instinctive and real. The keepers started adapting their routine. They made sure the area was calm when Lily visited, reducing crowd noise so Kobo wouldn't get distracted. They even placed a small bench just for her, a gesture of respect. The bond between girl and gorilla had become part of the zoo's rhythm, unwritten, but understood. It wasn't just Lily who felt lighter when they met, the staff did too. Her visits filled the air with something gentle that lingered long after she left. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, Mark watched Kobo sitting peacefully while Lily drew by the glass. He turned to another keeper and said softly, "She's healing him." The other keeper nodded but added, "Maybe he's healing her too." Neither of them spoke again. They just watched the two friends, separated by glass yet bound by something no wall could contain, as the sky slowly turned gold. Every afternoon, Lily would sit by the glass, her small hands pressed against it as Kobo approached, curious and calm. The zookeepers noticed how she spoke to him as if he were a friend, not a wild animal. Her voice carried warmth, filling the quiet enclosure with soft stories. She told him about her school, her favorite books, and the way the sunlight hit her hospital window. Kobo listened, his deep eyes locked on hers, breathing slow, steady, as if absorbing every word she said. One day, Lily brought a drawing she made, two figures holding hands under a giant tree. "That's us," she said, pointing to the larger one. Kobo tilted his head, studying the image. He touched the glass where her tiny figure was drawn, his thick finger tracing it with gentle precision. The moment made the zookeepers pause, realizing this was no ordinary connection. It was as though they spoke a secret language, one made of glances, gestures, and trust that didn't need words. Sometimes Lily spoke about her fears. She confessed that she was tired of hospitals, of needles, of waking up afraid. Kobo stayed still during those talks, his body low, eyes steady. There was something grounding about his silence, it didn't pity her, it understood her. When she cried softly, he would press his hand against the glass, and she'd do the same, feeling comfort even without touch. The caretakers often turned away, pretending to work, hiding their tears. Lily also shared her dreams. She wanted to grow up, to travel, to see mountains and oceans she had only read about. But most of all, she wanted Kobo to live in a place where he could run free, not behind barriers and glass. "You don't belong in a cage," she whispered once. Kobo exhaled deeply, almost like a sigh. It made her smile. She started to believe he understood, maybe not her words, but her heart. And in return, he gave her peace she couldn't find anywhere else. Her visits became part of Kobo's rhythm. When she arrived, he'd move closer before she even called his name. He began eating more, moving more, and showing signs of playfulness again. Lily would wave through the glass, pretending they were waving across a river instead of steel and walls. She told him that one day she'd come see him not as a patient but as a girl who made it, strong, healed, and ready to keep her promise to him. During one of their longer talks, Lily brought a book and read aloud to him. Her voice wavered, sometimes breaking, but she continued. Kobo sat down, his gaze never leaving her face. Each word seemed to calm him, his breathing slow and deep. When she laughed at a funny part, he tilted his head and grunted softly, almost like laughter too. It was their small world, a quiet place where pain didn't exist for a while, only connection. The zookeepers began recording their interactions for research, but deep down they knew no study could capture what they witnessed. Lily wasn't just helping Kobo recover, he was helping her too. Her doctors noticed she was smiling more, her strength improving despite the odds. She told them, "Kobo makes me feel brave." And it was true. Every visit reminded her that kindness could bridge even the widest gap, between a child and a gorilla, between hope and fear. As the weeks passed, the bond only deepened. Lily often stayed past closing time, resting by the glass as the sun faded. Kobo would sit beside her, motionless, as if guarding her fragile body through the night. Sometimes she'd whisper, "Promise me you'll be okay," and though Kobo couldn't answer, his steady gaze was enough. The staff would finally lead her out, and Kobo's eyes followed her until she disappeared from view, waiting for the next sunrise, when his little friend would return. The mornings grew quieter for Lily. Her visits to the zoo became less frequent as her illness progressed. When she arrived, she wore a soft scarf over her head, hiding the hair she had lost during treatments. Her steps were slower, but her smile never faltered. She greeted Kobo the same way, pressing her hand to the glass, and he moved closer as if he sensed the weight she carried. On days she could not come, Kobo's behavior shifted noticeably. He would pace near the back of his enclosure, glancing repeatedly at the entrance gate. He seemed restless, almost anxious, his massive frame tense and alert. The keepers began noting the difference. The gorilla who had once been calm and playful now appeared worried whenever Lily was absent. It was as though he understood that something was changing. When she did arrive, she often sat for shorter periods, leaning against the glass for support. She would talk to Kobo about the hospital, her treatments, and how she missed school. Despite her weakened state, she laughed softly at the smallest things Kobo did, a tilt of his head, a slow blink, a gentle tap against the glass. Her parents watched with mixed pride and sorrow, knowing she was giving her strength to someone else even as her own body grew frail. Her father noticed that she sometimes carried a small notebook, where she wrote or sketched quietly. One day, she handed it to Kobo through the glass, placing it near him. Kobo sniffed it carefully, then touched the corner with a finger. The gesture was deliberate, full of attention. He stayed there longer than usual, sitting close to the notebook as if he understood that it contained a piece of her heart. The keepers whispered to each other, observing the bond intensify even as Lily's health declined. They said it was rare for animals to connect so deeply, to sense fragility and respond with such tenderness. Mark, the senior keeper, said quietly, "I think he knows she's struggling. He's waiting for her." And indeed, Kobo would often approach the glass before anyone else arrived, scanning the entrance anxiously. Lily's mother sometimes spoke softly to her daughter about resting more, skipping visits when needed. Lily always shook her head gently. "I have to see him," she said. "He waits for me. He needs me." Her parents could only watch, torn between protecting her and respecting her unwavering devotion. The gorilla had become not just a friend but a reason for her to face each day with courage. On days when Lily didn't come, Kobo sometimes thumped his chest in frustration, then returned to pacing near the gate. Visitors who noticed commented on how unusually alert he was. Even the younger staff, who hadn't witnessed the early bond, could feel the tension in the enclosure. It wasn't playfulness or curiosity anymore, it was worry, anticipation, and longing, all focused on the gate where Lily should appear. Despite the struggle in her body, Lily's visits remained moments of joy. She would hum softly, show him sketches, and leave small flowers at the glass. Each time she left, Kobo's eyes followed her until she disappeared from view. The keepers often exchanged glances, realizing that the connection they witnessed was no longer just remarkable, it was sacred. For both girl and gorilla, each meeting became a fragile but essential thread in a world that was rapidly changing. The sun poured over the zoo that morning, golden and warm, painting the pathways with light. Lily arrived holding a small blue scarf, her favorite plush bear tucked under her arm. Her parents walked beside her, silent, knowing the visit would be different. There was a weight in the air that neither of them could explain, a quiet understanding that today was special. She stopped before the gorilla enclosure, her hand resting lightly on the glass. Kobo was already there, sitting in the same spot he had waited for weeks. When he saw her, his posture shifted instantly, eyes softening, chest rising and falling with gentle anticipation. Lily placed her blue scarf on the edge of the glass and set her plush bear beside it. She pressed her palm to the barrier, and he mirrored her, lifting his massive hand to meet hers. The simple contact held 1,000 unspoken words. For several long minutes, neither moved. Lily whispered to him about her day, her small triumphs, her quiet fears. Kobo leaned closer, his warm breath fogging the glass slightly. Visitors passed by, pausing briefly, sensing something extraordinary but not understanding the depth. Lily's mother rested a hand lightly on her shoulder, feeling the serenity in her daughter's presence even as sadness threatened to surface. She spoke about dreams she would never see fulfilled and adventures she hoped he might have. "One day, I want you to run free, Kobo," she murmured. He pressed his forehead to the glass, close to her face, as if he understood. The zoo staff watched, hearts aching, realizing this silent farewell was both tender and heartbreaking. The bond they had nurtured over weeks was more vivid than ever, made tangible by shared glances and gestures. The little plush bear became a focus of Kobo's attention. He nudged it gently with his fingers, rolling it once and then pausing to look back at Lily. She laughed softly, a small, melodic sound that carried across the enclosure. "You like him, don't you?" she asked. He blinked slowly, the gorilla's version of acknowledgement, and leaned his massive shoulder against the glass, staying close as though not wanting to let go. Time moved differently in that moment. Lily stayed longer than usual, sitting cross-legged by the glass, humming softly and sketching Kobo quietly on a small notepad. His dark eyes never left her, and every small gesture, a tap, a sigh, a lean, felt like a conversation. The staff exchanged glances, realizing that what they were witnessing transcended words. This was connection in its purest form, born of patience, trust, and shared time. When it was finally time to leave, Lily pressed her palm to the glass one last time. Kobo mirrored her motion, pressing his massive hand down slowly, lingering as long as he could. Her mother helped her up gently, and her father picked up the little plush bear. As they walked away, Kobo stayed by the glass, eyes fixed on her until she disappeared from sight. He let out a deep, low sound, almost like a sigh, and sat back down, his shoulders heavy but calm. The morning air felt different after they left. Lily's father whispered that he had never seen anything like it. Her mother nodded, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. Somewhere across the zoo, Kobo remained close to the glass, guarding the spot she had occupied, carrying the memory of her presence. That day became etched in the hearts of all who witnessed it, a quiet lesson in love, patience, and the fragile beauty of fleeting moments. The days after Lily's last visit were heavy with quiet. Kobo, once lively and attentive, now sat in the same corner of his enclosure, eyes fixed on the gate where she had always appeared. The keepers noticed immediately that he refused his meals, leaving fruit and vegetables untouched. His massive frame slumped slightly, and the playful gestures that had returned during Lily's visits vanished as if she had carried them away with her. Visitors began to notice the change too. Families paused, whispering, pointing at the gorilla who no longer moved with ease or curiosity. Children pressed their faces to the glass, asking why he looked sad. The staff tried to explain, but even they struggled to find words. There was something unmistakable in Kobo's gaze, a longing that no one had seen before, focused entirely on the empty gate. Mark, the senior keeper, kept a close watch. He recorded Kobo's behavior in detail, noting each sigh, each slow turn of his head, each glance toward the entrance. The gorilla had become restless, pacing occasionally, sitting silently, staring for hours without blinking. No enrichment toys, no other gorillas, seemed to draw his attention. Lily's absence had left a void that nothing could fill. When the other gorillas approached him, Kobo often ignored them or gently moved away. The quiet enclosure was no longer just a habitat, it had become a waiting room. Visitors sometimes asked if he was ill, and the keepers would only shrug. They had never witnessed anything like this. The bond with Lily had been deep and real, and now the emptiness she left behind had become painfully visible. Every morning, the keepers would see him rise as the zoo opened, walking slowly to the same spot near the gate. He would press his hands to the glass where she had once leaned, leaving small smudges that caught the light. It was as if he was searching for her, marking the place where her presence had meant the most. Mark noticed how he tilted his head at every passing sound, hoping it was her footsteps. Some visitors stayed longer, watching quietly, sensing the sorrow that filled the air. It was hard to look away. Even those who came for entertainment were caught by the intensity of Kobo's gaze, by the solemnity of his stillness. The staff began guiding them gently, explaining that animals can feel loss, that friendships exist even across species. Some nodded, moved to tears, understanding something deeper than words. Kobo refused meals for days, then slowly began picking at them, but his heart and attention remained elsewhere. He would sit, unmoving, his eyes heavy with waiting, only occasionally glancing at the other gorillas or the keepers who tried to coax him. The zoo felt quieter somehow, the air dense with expectation, as if everyone present felt the absence of the small girl who had changed everything. Even as night fell, Kobo remained by the gate until the last staff left. The sunset painted golden streaks across his fur, and his deep eyes followed the empty path beyond the enclosure. He did not play, did not move restlessly, except to glance repeatedly toward the entrance. It was a silence filled with yearning, a silent vigil for a friend who had left an imprint no one could erase, a longing that was patient, deep, and unwavering. The zoo felt heavier that morning. One of the keepers, John, approached the enclosure quietly, carrying a small blue plush bear, the same one Lily had left behind on her last visit. The weight of his steps seemed heavier than usual. Only the staff knew the truth, Lily had passed away. Her family had asked them to keep it private, wanting to protect the moments she had shared with Kobo from sudden grief. John knelt by the glass, placing the plush bear carefully on the ledge. He whispered softly, explaining, in his own words, that Lily would not be returning. He told Kobo that she loved him, that she had been brave, and that she had thought of him every day. Kobo lowered his massive head, resting it near the toy, his eyes dark and still, absorbing the news in a silence that carried the weight of sorrow. For hours, Kobo did not move. He sat close to the glass, pressing one hand gently over the plush bear as if holding Lily herself. The zookeepers watched, their own hearts breaking, seeing a creature grieve in a way that mirrored the humans who loved him. Visitors passed by, sensing the solemnity in the enclosure, but no one dared disturb him. The energy of loss was thick, almost tangible, wrapping the zoo in quiet mourning. John left quietly, closing the gate behind him, but Kobo remained. He nudged the plush bear repeatedly, then placed his forehead against it. His deep eyes never left the spot where Lily's hand would have rested. It was as though he was listening for her voice, feeling for her presence, trying to bridge the distance that death had made permanent. The staff stayed close, unsure whether to intervene or simply bear witness. The younger gorillas approached cautiously, curious but hesitant. Kobo did not react with aggression or fear, he merely shifted slightly to make room, keeping his focus on the bear and the glass. The enclosure had changed from a playground to a vigil. Each staff member felt the weight of the moment, realizing that a bond that had once been full of laughter and warmth now carried grief so profound that it silenced even the air around them. Over the next few days, Kobo's behavior remained unchanged. He refused to eat, except for small bites, and spent long stretches of time in the same spot. He pressed his hand against the glass at odd angles, as if searching for Lily's reflection or scent. The keepers tried to comfort him with enrichment toys and fruit, but he ignored them all. His eyes, always so expressive, seemed filled with a question that had no answer: where had she gone? Mark, watching from a distance, felt tears blur his vision. He had cared for animals for decades but had never seen grief so pure, so concentrated. She changed him, he whispered to John. And now he feels the emptiness she left behind. Even the public noticed. Guests paused before the enclosure, whispering, moved by a sadness that felt impossible to fully explain, a quiet testament to love shared across species. That evening, the zoo emptied, leaving Kobo alone with the plush bear. He leaned against it, pressing his forehead once more to the soft fabric. Outside, the sunset bathed the enclosure in warm golden light, but inside, the gorilla's massive frame seemed to fold under the weight of loss. The bear, a simple reminder of Lily's presence, became a lifeline, a silent connection to a friend who had left too soon but whose memory would remain forever in his heart. The next morning, Kobo arrived at the usual spot with the same quiet anticipation, but today something was different. He began gathering leaves and small flowers from the corners of his enclosure, arranging them carefully in a neat little pile beside the blue plush bear Lily had left behind. The keepers watched from a distance, unable to comprehend why he was doing this. It was deliberate, methodical, and unlike any behavior they had ever observed. He sat beside the pile, massive body folded close to the ground, his eyes fixed on the small mound as if it carried the weight of the world. Hours passed, and he did not move, dozing lightly but always keeping one hand near the leaves and flowers. The sunlight shifted across the enclosure, casting long shadows over his fur, and yet Kobo remained steadfast, guarding the small collection with an almost reverent care. Visitors arrived and stopped at the glass, whispering among themselves. Children leaned in, wide-eyed, while adults held their breaths. Some thought he was playing, others felt a quiet sorrow. None could explain why a gorilla would make such a display, and the zookeepers offered only soft guidance. They knew it was more than play. Kobo's actions were intentional, an outward sign of grief and memory tied to the girl who had left him. Mark and John stayed close, taking notes, recording each moment. The gorilla would occasionally adjust a leaf or add a new flower to the pile, returning his gaze to the plush bear afterward. The ritual repeated over hours, and the more they watched, the more it became clear, Kobo was trying to recreate the presence of Lily in a tangible way. The arrangement of natural objects beside the toy was his way of honoring her memory. He did not interact with the other gorillas. They came near once or twice, sniffing the enclosure, but Kobo barely noticed them. His focus was absolute, entirely on the mound and the bear. The keepers whispered to each other about the intelligence and depth of emotion he was displaying. This was not instinct, it was grief made visible, a bridge between his heart and a friend who was no longer there. Throughout the day, visitors came and went, quietly observing. Some took photos, but most simply watched in respectful silence. Kobo never shifted his attention, never looked toward the keepers, never wandered to other parts of the enclosure. He remained beside the pile, a solemn presence, monumental in both size and feeling, as if the small arrangement of leaves, flowers, and a plush toy contained all the love he had received and all he could not say. As the sun dipped low, Kobo moved slightly to rest his head on his massive hand, still close to the pile. The wind scattered a few petals from the flowers, but he adjusted them carefully, tucking them back beside the plush bear. The keepers exchanged quiet words. They had witnessed countless animal behaviors over decades, but this was unique. Kobo was grieving in a way humans might understand, expressing loss, loyalty, and love through small, deliberate actions. That evening, as the zoo emptied, Kobo remained in place. The enclosure was silent except for the rustle of leaves and the occasional distant bird call. He rested his back against the glass, one hand on the bear, the other near the mound he had created. For hours, he sat like that, a quiet sentinel holding memory, care, and devotion, as if saying without words, "She was here, and I remember." The world outside the glass faded, leaving only the unspoken bond between girl and gorilla. A visitor stood quietly near the gorilla enclosure, phone in hand, capturing Kobo sitting beside the small pile of leaves, flowers, and Lily's plush bear. The gorilla's stillness and solemnity were striking, his eyes focused on the objects as if holding a conversation with the past. The visitor's fingers trembled slightly as they recorded, sensing the extraordinary weight of the moment. Every movement, every small gesture, spoke of love, grief, and memory beyond words. Within hours, the video was shared online. It spread like wildfire, first among animal lovers, then to a broader audience. Comments poured in from around the world, grandparents, parents, teenagers, even children, each struck by the scene of a gorilla quietly mourning. People marveled at his sensitivity, amazed that an animal could express grief so clearly and profoundly, and yet so gently. News outlets picked up the story, broadcasting clips on television and social media. Experts in animal behavior weighed in, explaining that gorillas are highly intelligent, capable of emotions humans often underestimate. Psychologists commented on the bond Lily and Kobo had formed, emphasizing that connection transcends species, and that grief is not unique to humans. Millions of viewers were captivated, drawn to the silent dialogue between girl and gorilla. The zoo received messages from far and wide, people asking about Kobo, about Lily, about the story behind the video. Letters arrived from schools, animal organizations, and families sharing their own experiences of love and loss. Mark and the staff were overwhelmed by the attention, but they knew the truth: it was not fame that mattered. It was that someone, somewhere, felt the power of connection in its purest form, through a gorilla and a child. Kobo, unaware of the world watching, continued his vigil. He nudged the plush bear, adjusted a leaf, and rested his massive head near the pile. The public saw it online as a moment of grief, yet the keepers recognized it as devotion, memory, and love. The quiet actions of a single gorilla had sparked empathy and reflection, reminding humans of the fragile, beautiful bonds that can exist across species and lifetimes. Social media comments flooded in with stories of people reconnecting with loved ones, visiting zoos, or simply pausing to reflect. Some wrote about their pets, others about family members they had lost, all inspired by the gorilla's patience and care. Discussions about animal intelligence, emotion, and the ethics of zoos spread alongside messages of hope, compassion, and understanding, proving that one small act can ripple across the world. The keepers noticed changes in visitor behavior at the zoo. Guests approached Kobo's enclosure with quiet reverence, leaving flowers or small notes in tribute to Lily. Children whispered softly, careful not to disturb him, and adults often lingered longer than expected, observing not just a gorilla, but a living symbol of memory and love. The enclosure, once ordinary, became a place of reflection, a testament to the bond that had begun with a simple, daily visit. Even after weeks of viral attention, Kobo remained faithful to his ritual. He sat beside the small pile, sometimes adding a leaf, sometimes nudging the plush bear. The world outside had been touched by his grief, but inside, it was always the same, a vigil of loyalty, love, and remembrance. For millions watching online, it was a lesson in empathy, patience, and the enduring power of connection, reminding everyone that even in loss, love can speak louder than words. The zoo decided to honor Lily in a way that would last forever. Near Kobo's enclosure, staff created a small garden filled with flowers, shrubs, and bright greenery. At its center stood a simple plaque, in memory of Lily, who taught us that love has no species. Visitors could pause, reflect, and leave small tokens, creating a living tribute to the girl whose friendship had touched a gorilla and the world beyond the zoo gates. Kobo watched the garden take shape from his enclosure. He leaned on the glass, inspecting every flower and leaf brought by the gardeners. The plush bear still sat beside the mound of leaves and flowers he had arranged, now part of a quiet ritual of remembrance. Staff noticed him nudge petals into place, as if ensuring that Lily's memory was honored exactly as it should be, with care, devotion, and patience. Visitors immediately noticed the change. Families lingered at the garden, reading the plaque aloud and pointing out the flowers to children. Some left small notes or pressed leaves into the soil. Children whispered stories about Lily, sharing what they had learned from the video online. The garden became a sanctuary, a place to remember the power of friendship, the weight of loss, and the strength found in love that knows no boundaries. Kobo's daily routine remained unchanged. He would settle by the glass, close to the plush bear and the mound of leaves and flowers, observing the new garden across the pathway. Though he could not comprehend the plaque or the human sentiment fully, the garden became part of his world, a constant reminder of Lily's presence and the small rituals that had connected them so deeply. Mark and John watched visitors' reactions in quiet awe. They noticed grandparents taking children by the hand, explaining the story of a girl who had transformed a gorilla's life. Some visitors shed tears quietly, moved by the devotion on display. Others smiled, inspired to nurture their own connections with loved ones. It was a moment of shared humanity, bridging generations and species alike, all through the legacy of a child's simple act of love. The flowers in Lily's garden bloomed brightly as weeks passed, some planted by the staff, others brought by visitors. Kobo occasionally nudged petals toward the glass, placing them carefully near his mound. It was as if he understood, in his own way, that this space was sacred. The garden became a part of him, just as Lily had become a part of him, her presence now eternal in both memory and living color. Visitors began leaving toys, drawings, and even letters at the edge of the garden, inspired by the story of a gorilla and a little girl. Some shared their own experiences of grief and connection, creating a ripple effect of empathy that extended far beyond the zoo. The garden became a place not only to mourn but to celebrate life, teaching everyone who came that love, no matter its form, leaves an indelible mark. At dusk, Kobo sat near his mound, plush bear beside him, eyes following the garden as the sun set. The flowers glowed softly in the golden light, their colors reflecting in his dark, watchful eyes. He remained patient, still, and attentive, a guardian of memory. For visitors and staff alike, the garden symbolized more than loss, it was a testament to joy, care, and the enduring power of connection, the love between a girl and a gorilla living on forever. Weeks passed, and something shifted in Kobo. The heaviness that had hung over him after Lily's passing began to ease. He still carried the blue plush bear everywhere, pressing it against his chest from time to time, but now he explored his enclosure more freely. The mound of leaves and flowers remained, but his attention began to expand, reaching beyond the glass to new interactions and small playful gestures. He started climbing and swinging on ropes he had once ignored, testing his strength and agility. The other gorillas noticed and tentatively joined him. Kobo engaged in brief play with them, though always keeping the plush bear close, a constant reminder of his connection with Lily. It was as if he had found a way to balance memory and life, holding on to love while embracing the present. Visitors watching Kobo were amazed. His large frame moved with newfound energy, but his eyes still held a quiet wisdom, the kind that comes from enduring loss. Children waved, adults smiled, and staff noticed the subtle shifts in his demeanor, moments of laughter, gentle interactions, and even small gestures of care toward other gorillas. The bear was never far, a symbol of continuity and affection that grounded him in both grief and joy. Mark observed Kobo closely, reflecting on the transformation. "He's learned something," he said softly to John. "Not about losing someone, but about carrying them forward." Each day, Kobo seemed more aware of his actions, more deliberate in play, and more patient in observation. The staff realized that the gorilla's grief had evolved into understanding, a deep, unspoken comprehension of love, loss, and the flow of life itself. Kobo began greeting regular visitors with small gestures, nudging the glass, pressing the plush bear against it, and sometimes performing gentle movements that seemed like invitations to observe him play. People who had witnessed his earlier grief now smiled with a mix of relief and awe. The transformation was subtle, yet powerful, a living testament to the resilience of the heart and the ability to honor someone while continuing to live fully. The garden across the path remained a constant presence. Kobo would occasionally glance toward it during play, pausing briefly, as if acknowledging Lily's memory. He began to combine movement with ritual, placing leaves or flowers near the glass and then returning to playful activity. It was no longer a solemn vigil but a quiet celebration of life, a blend of remembrance and vitality that reflected lessons only a unique friendship could teach. Staff and visitors alike began to see Kobo not just as a gorilla, but as a being capable of deep emotional growth. His interactions with the plush bear, the garden, and his fellow gorillas conveyed subtle messages of care and presence. The bear had become more than a toy, it was a bridge between worlds, a symbol of enduring affection, and a tool through which Kobo processed both sorrow and joy, transforming loss into something meaningful. As the sun set over the enclosure, Kobo clutched the plush bear, gazing at the flowers in Lily's garden before returning to playful exploration. The weight of sadness had lifted, replaced by quiet joy and reflection. In his own way, he had understood something profound: love does not end with absence, loss can be transformed into growth, and even the smallest bonds can teach lessons that last a lifetime. Kobo had discovered the continuum between grief and happiness, and in that understanding, he thrived. Months passed, and the air at the zoo felt different. The staff knew a special day was coming. Lily's parents would visit Lily's garden. They carried the familiar blue plush bear carefully, their hands trembling slightly with anticipation. Kobo, sensing something, watched quietly from his usual spot by the glass, eyes alert but calm, as if he already knew who was arriving and what this moment meant. As Lily's parents approached, Kobo shifted closer to the glass, his massive frame moving with measured grace. When the bear came into view, recognition sparked across his face. He pressed one hand gently against the glass, leaning toward it, while his eyes stayed locked on the familiar object. The mound of leaves and flowers beside him seemed to glow under the sunlight, and for a moment, everything felt suspended, full of quiet understanding. The parents knelt by the glass, holding the plush bear out toward Kobo. Tears brimmed in their eyes, but their faces reflected peace, not grief. Kobo responded by sitting calmly beside the mound, gently nudging the bear as if to welcome them, offering a silent connection that transcended words. The scene carried the weight of loss, love, and continuity, bridging the absence of Lily with the presence of her memory in every gesture. Mark and John watched from a distance, sensing the significance. Visitors who had gathered around sensed it too, some whispering softly, others holding children close. The interaction was subtle yet profound, a gorilla, a toy, and the loving parents of a girl who had left the world far too soon. Each movement conveyed recognition, empathy, and an acknowledgement that love, even when separated by life and death, remains tangible. Kobo leaned his forehead against the glass, resting one massive hand near the bear in the parents' hands. The parents whispered to him, softly telling him who they were, recounting little stories of Lily, and sharing moments she had cherished. The gorilla listened with quiet attentiveness, never moving abruptly, never losing focus, as though he understood that this visit was a bridge between what had been lost and what still remained in memory and heart. Flowers from Lily's garden swayed gently in the wind outside the enclosure. Kobo's eyes occasionally flicked toward them, a reminder that life continued beyond the glass, and that love could exist in multiple forms simultaneously. The parents placed a small bouquet near the bear, watching Kobo interact with it. In those quiet moments, grief, remembrance, and joy coexisted peacefully, blending into a single, profound connection that words could not fully capture. The encounter lasted for what felt like hours. Kobo moved slowly, adjusting the plush bear, resting beside the pile of leaves and flowers, and occasionally glancing at the parents. There was no urgency, no expectation, only presence. The scene resonated with everyone watching, a lesson in patience, the endurance of memory, and the subtle ways love continues to manifest, even after loss has reshaped lives forever. As the sun dipped lower, casting golden light across the enclosure, Kobo finally settled beside the bear, calm and content. Lily's parents stood, taking one last look before leaving, hearts full with the sense of closure and peace. The moment had brought understanding, a quiet serenity that spoke of life, loss, and the enduring power of connection. In that instant, the bond between girl, gorilla, and family was complete, a testament to love beyond boundaries. The sun bathed Lily's garden in a warm, golden light. Kobo sat quietly beside the blue plush bear, his massive hands resting gently on the mound of leaves and flowers. The garden had grown lush and vibrant, every petal and leaf a tribute to a little girl whose presence had transcended the limits of life itself. Visitors paused at the sight, sensing a peace that radiated beyond words, feeling the invisible bond that connected child, gorilla, and world. Mark and John watched from the side, hearts full as they observed Kobo. The gorilla's eyes were calm, attentive, and reflective, as if he understood the permanence of love and the beauty of memory. Each gesture, from nudging the bear to adjusting a leaf in the mound, carried meaning. It was a quiet celebration, a demonstration that grief can coexist with joy, and that bonds forged in life can leave an enduring legacy. A gentle breeze stirred the flowers, scattering petals across the garden in soft, colorful arcs. Kobo lifted his head, inhaling the fragrance, and seemed to breathe in the stories of those who had visited, the letters and tokens left behind, and the love that Lily had planted in the hearts of all who knew her story. The garden had become more than a memorial, it was a living reminder of hope, devotion, and the power of connection. Visitors lingered quietly, some placing flowers near the bear, others simply watching Kobo, sensing a lesson beyond explanation. Children whispered to parents about Lily, about courage, about friendship that transcends boundaries. The garden echoed with these quiet reflections, spreading the understanding that life's most profound teachings often emerge from simple, pure acts of love and empathy. The parents of Lily returned occasionally, kneeling by the glass, placing the plush bear in front of Kobo, and watching him interact with it. Each visit was calm, full of reverence and subtle communication. No words were needed. The bond that had begun with Lily now continued through gestures, memories, and quiet moments of presence, teaching those who observed that love remains, even when the person is gone. Kobo rested beside the bear as the sun continued its descent, casting long, peaceful shadows across the garden. The flowers glowed, reflecting a palette of warmth and life. There was serenity in his stillness, an understanding that life and loss can coexist, and that happiness is not the absence of grief, but the embrace of love in all its forms, past and present. The narrator's voice, soft and reflective, seemed to drift across the garden. Some bonds surpass time, illness, and even life itself. Lily may be gone, but she left enough love to flourish in everyone who witnessed her friendship with Kobo. Love persists, grows, and transforms, touching hearts in ways that endure beyond our own presence. As the scene faded, Kobo remained beside the bear, the sun painting him and the garden in a golden embrace. Flowers swayed gently, the leaves rustled softly, and the garden breathed with life. It was a moment of serene closure, a final lesson of connection, love, and enduring happiness. For anyone who looked closely, the message was clear: life is fragile, love is powerful, and happiness can be found in cherishing the bonds that endure. If Lily and Kobo's friendship touched your heart, consider joining our family by subscribing to the channel, so you never miss another story that celebrates love, hope, and connection.